Correct. And we find out that the molten iron in the basements is not really, that's not from steel. I always thought that maybe that was the melted steel. It's not. It's actually the end of a thermite reaction.
Because it turns steel into molten iron.
Correct.
It was the byproduct of smelting. I guess the reverse smelting. Breaking steel that was produced with the coke down into, like, pig iron. Is that right?
When I talked to some other gentlemen at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, they were telling me that it is not from just, there's iron makes up a part of steel, obviously. But that's not where that iron comes from. It comes from the thermite reaction itself.
And with the spectrometers, Jones and others, and separately people duplicated this, you get the samples. It has the exact byproducts, the leavings of the explosive thermite.
Correct. And of course, we have discovered the unspent thermite in this stuff. Well, anyway, this next chart here shows what should have happened. I mean, this is exactly what should have happened. This top part should have fallen off in one chunk, 32 stories tall, with structural integrity inside of it, right here. But this didn't happen. And the reason why it didn't happen, obviously, is it had been exploded from the top up and from the all the way up and down the building. Now, this is what we're asked to believe, and you don't need any fancy mathematics to prove this. Just the 5 inches of concrete floors multiplied by 110 is going to give you almost 4 foot high, 4-story high a stack of concrete pancakes. Now, since it did have 6 stories under the ground right here, that would take care of that. But we're forgetting the steel. Steel like that just doesn't fold up into anything. There's steel in between each one of these floors. So you've got to at least permit at least 3 feet of gnarled, twisted steel in between each one of these concrete slabs. The result is you're going to end up with about a 27-story pile of pancake slabs and twisted steel.
But instead it was like a 1-story pile?
Oh, maybe 2 stories above the basement. So, of course, there was lots of debris in the basement level. So, you're talking about, 8 stories, but you don't see any slabs. There's no slabs at all. The concrete is gone. And we know where it went. It went all over Manhattan. Southern Manhattan was covered with it.
And then the EPA lied and said that the mercury from all the equipment and the computers and the mercury-fired thermostats and the asbestos and the concrete was good for the firefighters. And the media, MSNBC, has called them conspiracy theorist scum, that they're even saying they're dying when all the universities and medical facilities, there's been literally hundreds of articles, they do CAT scans, and some of them have multiple ounces of the glass and stuff in their lungs. They're dying. They're not faking going in the ground.
I believe they've got nanothermite in their lungs. I don't know why they couldn't have been breathing all that stuff, too. It was in every dust sample taken, and that's what we found. So anyway, the next, this is showing the full height of the building. And the mechanical floors that were spaced in between.
This is how it's overbuilt to 2,000 times stress.
That's right. And then we have they also use trusses in these zones to connect the exterior to the core.
The size of a giant railroad trestle.
That's right. It keeps the building from leaning too much and from swaying.
In the wind.
Right. That's right. And so this is showing the core at the top that's supporting the 5-story hat truss. And of course, you know about train trestles, the kind of things they can carry, the kind of weight. You can park a train on them, and there was one over by the tap house that's about 250 feet long, and they park trains on them loaded with gravel and everything else. And this one's 5 stories and only spans 65 feet and 35 feet and could certainly support anything near the top for sure, merely by transferring the tension at the top onto the heavy steel core in the middle.
So the plane couldn't have sliced it off like it did.
Yeah. What I was worried about is if you cut all these columns on the outside, or a lot of them, would you have global collapse? Well, the fact is, no, you wouldn't. In fact, if you're this close to the top, you could probably cut every column all the way around, and the hat truss would transfer all of the tension in those columns over to the central core. And when on the North Tower, as we get over here, you see it's even.
But again, according to the media, the documented mega central core didn't exist.
That's right. They called it a hollow tube. And it's not even a tube in a tube. It's a building in a tube. It is a different, actually, there's two different types of structural systems combined into one.
And it turns out Building 7 was overbuilt as the emergency FEMA New York bunker.
Yes.
And it magically, of course, CIA was based in it.
Yeah, that's right. This shows the outer columns. They're 3'3", center to center. The glass in between them, from steel to steel edge, it's only 2'1", and with the column with the glass mullions in there, the width of glass in there, what you could actually look out of was only 18 inches wide. And these things run top to bottom, and they are connected by both bolts and steel clips. And I want you to look at this too. This portion right here is the spandrel. It's 54 inches deep. That's 4'6", and it's 2 inches of steel, and it's welded to every column on the outer face. And that is what is actually carrying any kind of damage that gets done to this exterior wall. Anything above it, wherever these columns are severed, anything that's above it gets transferred over to the end columns on either side of it by these heavy steel spandrels that are 54 inches deep. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, this is what kind of shocked me. When you see these trusses, you think, well, the main ones are running out to the wall. So the corrugation in a steel, you always want to put it perpendicular to your main trusses. So it should be running this way. But they turned it. So the main weight-bearing trusses are actually running parallel to the outer wall. And they did that so they would make this diaphragm more powerful heading towards the exterior wall. So this doesn't buckle up. This isn't going to roll up when you hit it. It's going to act like a knife blade. It just won't buckle. It's going to be very difficult to buckle because all the corrugations are going.
You got a bunch of plastic and aluminum slamming into it. It's going to get like a cheese grater.
It is. And it's running in both ways. As you can see, this heavy here and little slots. So it's going to shred it. And so that once it goes past this wall, there's very little that's in a very large piece to do much damage at all. And when you study some of the photographs, one of the best ones I've seen, which has this woman standing in it, I think we've all seen that woman standing in that slot on the north building where where it went in.
Waving a shirt.
Yeah. These columns that you see here, they weren't totally unintact and blown back into the building. They were still hanging there like a loose tooth, meaning they didn't really get rid of them. It wasn't like totally blown off.
On the initial impact point, when it had its most force and the entire plane went through that space, it couldn't even knock those out entirely.
Correct. They couldn't.
And as it goes in, it dissipates and loses force. That's like General Benton K. Parton, who immediately went to Oklahoma City because he was watching the news, and they said the Ryder truck was here, and it was a little bitty crater, and he saw columns right by it, not even damaged, but way back in the back, blasted off with blast points at an angle where controlled demolitions have been put in, because you don't want to blow a column straight across. It a lot of times will stay, with its own weight on top of the other. You got to blast at an edge. And he said, blast points. Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
Correct. And he also said that the exponential loss of power from that is tremendous. And he said it wouldn't even take a ceiling tiles out, just the lay-in ceiling tiles at like 30 feet or so. So that was an amazing, General Parton, it was did a great job on that. Again, this is probably, this is showing how all the damage that were done by these jets on the World Trade Center was very compartmentalized by the nature of how it is built. since there are trusses running in both directions for these floors, it is called a space frame. And I thought maybe I was taking a little liberty in calling it a space frame, but even the authors back in the 70s, when they were writing about this building, they too used the term space frame floors. So I'm going to do it too. And they are acting like a space frame floor. So the reason why...
And all of this interlocks to support everything else.
Right. So the reason why this now, if there were only trusses running in one direction and you crashed into it here, all these floors would completely collapse all the way down here because they were running the full length. Well, that's not what was happening. Since there were trusses running in both directions, these are still held by the outer columns that were still in place. So these are acting like huge columns here now. And now all these spandrels up here that are on the outer face connecting all the steel columns, these are all heavy beams going back to these heavy columns.
And you got the giant trestle tying it all together.
And that's right. Even if you did have a loss of all this train trestle type thing, 5 stories tall.
I've never heard of Jawas hitting something this big. But that's because they didn't. Again, look at these blast points. I'm using a Star Wars analogy.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, here's another fun way to think about this because of the relativity of things. You can also think of this as a 1 billion-pound fly swatter hitting a 300-ton airplane. So it's just another way of looking.
It'd be like a fly hitting a fly swatter, and the whole fly swatter collapses.
Correct.
In a little
Next time you hit a fly, be very careful. If this would be true.
I'm sorry for the cheesy Star Wars analogy. It's actually, I've never heard of sand people hitting something this big.
We're having a good time.
No, that's a false flag in Star Wars Episode 4 when they blow up the sand crawler and Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker are there, and he's going, I've never heard of sand people, hitting something this big, some nomads with little bitty pop guns. And Obi-Wan Kenobi says, that's because they didn't. We're made to believe they did. And he goes, look at these blast points. This was done professionally. The point is to say that guys in a cave did this and that all the laws of science were suspended and that NORAD was running drills of the exact same targets being attacked. And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And then Building 7's hit by nothing and just implodes in on itself. It's just insane.
Well, not only that, we have on Building 7, we have the man that bought the lease on the World Trade Center 6 weeks before it occurred, Larry Silverstein, has this conversation on PBS where he admits that he got a call from the fire department and said they weren't sure they could control the fire in the Building 7. And he said, well, since we had such tremendous loss of life, maybe the smartest thing to do is just pull it. And then they made the decision to pull, and we watched it fall down.
And then they lie and say, well, that doesn't mean controlled demolition. But 5 minutes later on the same show, they show them destroying the wreckage of 6 and 5, and they say, getting ready to pull Building 6. It's a guy with a southern accent, yeah. And then they blow it up.
Well, I've actually heard, this kills me, Alex. They tried to repair that later by saying, well, what we meant by pull was pull the firemen out. Well, why would they be waiting for the building to fall down after they pulled the fire? But were the firemen holding it up? I mean, that has nothing to,
yeah, we pulled the firemen out and watched the building come down.
Yeah, no,
they didn't say, they said we gave the order to pull it.
That is correct. And
you got BBC 25 minutes before on 2 channels, the exact same words. I predicted it was Reuters that fed them because I know they feed BBC News a lot. 24 and World. BBC 24 and World announced Solomon Brothers fell in its own footprint from the fires. She's broadcasting. It's right behind her.
Yes, yeah.
I mean,
Well, another thing architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth are now talking about is bringing a grand jury investigation of Isham, what's his name, Sunder? I can't. Siam, I think it's Siam Sunder, who is head of. I believe that was NIST, and he's head of it and head of the review of the collapse of Building 7. And so let me tell you something. When he first said that he had come up, that the NIST had come up with a new way to review the collapse of this building, and that architects and engineers should now consider thermal expansion. I almost fell out of my chair. I thought that was the funniest thing I'd ever heard.